sure to check out the xreport.net. I repeat, the xreport.net for exclusive sports content written by yours truly and fellow X Report writers, previous episodes of our lovely podcast, and other videos on our YouTube channel entitled The X Report.
Welcome to the X Report. I'm Raven X, and I have a new list for you guys. Now, last year, after WrestleMania or around WrestleMania, we did a list of our top 10 favorite all-time wrestlers. And that was last year, and a lot has changed for me over this past year, and so I have a new list. So I'm just going to hop right into it. Not even going to do an intro, even though I'm so used to doing it. Starting at number 10, I have Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. One thing that I love about Ricky the Dragon Steamboat is just his in-ring prowess. I mean, back in the time that he was wrestling, primarily in the 80s and early 90s, it was a time of gimmicks. You know, you had the Ultimate Warrior, you had Hulk Hogan, Sergeant Slaughter, and you had very little legitimate in-ring talent. And I feel like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat embodied what it's like to be a talented in-ring wrestler. Now, of course, the dragon thing was nice because it added a bit to his character, but he didn't define him. You know, you could still reflect on his talent. If you look at some of his matches against Ric Flair, who I think is his greatest opponent, or if you look at his match at WrestleMania against Macho Man, you see that in a time where great wrestling was sparse, he was a great wrestler. What he did in the ring embodied what you want a wrestler to be and inspired wrestlers to come behind him. So he's definitely in my top 10. Moving on to number 9. Now, if you guys listen to the show, you know how much flack myself, Keezy, Ethan, Malik give this man. But you know what? Pre-2012, John Cena was my guy. Now, I'm only referring to John Cena from 2002 to 2011. Everything before he faced The Rock. It may be shocking to hear him on my list, but you guys have to understand, when I was younger, first I was a Triple H fan, and then I was a John Cena fan. I was a John Cena fan heavy. I loved John Cena. I had the medallions, the hat, the shirts, countless shirts. Like, pretty much any John Cena memorabilia you could have, I had it. And I was proud to wear my John Cena flag. And now, even though things seem hard just to watch him in the ring and hear him talk, if I watch an old pay-per-view, let's say Ruthless Aggression era, I get hyped to see John Cena. When I see him, I'm usually find myself rooting for him or happy to see him. And because of the impact he had on my childhood, I just can't not have him in my top 10. Number 8, JBL. Yes, him as a person may be a douchebag. And, you know, I'm not going to say it's okay, but I mean, it's what made JBL, and I feel like JBL is one of the best gimmicks the WWE has ever done. Going from Bradshaw to JBL, a Wall Street man with a strong Texas accent, coming out in a limousine with the long horns on top. I just think it was a perfect gimmick, not to mention the clothesline from hell is one of my favorite finishers, and plus, he's just an all-around entertaining wrestler to watch. Of course, if you can't get past your personal feelings about him, I understand, but just what he's in the ring, especially from a heel standpoint, is one of the most unmatched things that the WWE has done in a long time. Not to mention, I loved him on commentary. I think that he just added a nice dimension to it because not only was he funny, but he also knew what he was talking about and gave a nice in-ring perspective. Moving on to number 7, I have one of a kind, Rob Van Dam. Now, RVD is one of those guys who everybody likes. I've yet to meet somebody who doesn't like RVD. But if you just look at what he did in the ring, it's not hard to see why. He had a great move set. He moved around a lot for a guy who was kind of shorter but really stocky. I mean, just looking at what he did and how he personified what it was like to have a fun match, it was just perfect. Not to mention, let's be honest here. His match at One Night Stand 2 against John Cena was freaking awesome. Not just because of the atmosphere, but because of the match that he got to put on. He also had great matches against Rey Mysterio, Kane. The list goes on and on. Just everything that he was able to accomplish in the ring is almost unprecedented. And I feel like he's still one of the most underrated wrestlers of all time. If you look at the impact he had on the business, especially from the ECW standpoint, and how he still looks like he can go for a while in the ring now, just speaks volume to the character and who he is. Number 6, I have Mickie James. Now, if you guys are familiar with last year's list, she was number 1 woman in my heart. She was my girl. I grew up a Mickie James fan. There was never a time I didn't like Mickie James. And if you would have asked me a year or two ago or when I was a kid, no one would ever be able to top Mickie James. But we'll get to that later, but right now she comes in at number 6. I just think that Mickie James was amazing, and she was before her time. Of course, everybody talks about Trish Stratus or Lita, but they never really give Mickie James her due. She is the one who brought the best out of Trish Stratus. During the Ruthless Aggression era, she was the woman who handled everything, who carried matches, who was a multi-time champion. Matter of fact, a 6-time women's champion, even though she deserves to at least tie Trish Stratus, but I don't think I'm going to get that because the WWE hates me. But overall, Mickie James is just uber talented in the ring. Like I said, she's before her time. She was doing things that Charlotte, Becky, Bayley, Sasha were doing back in 2006, 2007, 8. And you just look at what she did, not only in the WWE, but also in TNA and in the Indies. It just shows she's had such a great and well-rounded career. And I just wish that she would get the respect that she rightfully deserves. Plus, Crazy Mickey's stalker gimmick is the best female gimmick of all time, and her and Trish still is the best women's feud. I will debate that to this day. Number 5, I have Randy Orton. Now, when I say Randy Orton, I don't mean face Randy Orton, dad bod Randy Orton, bad haircut Randy Orton. I mean crazy, the Viper, legend killer Randy Orton hears voices, and I genuinely believe he does. I mean, during his feud with Triple H back in 2009, I legitimately thought he was crazy. I watched it. I watched that build up to WrestleMania, which is one of my favorite builds, period. The breaking into the houses, him running through the McMahon family, him winning the Royal Rumble. All of that just culminated into being such a great character, not to mention his tremendous character work that he has had beforehand and since. We always talk about him being the youngest world heavyweight champion. Never seem to talk about who it was against, but we talk about the accolades he's had in his career. I mean, if you look at the feuds he's had, how he's been able to work his character, as everything about Randy Orton, I feel, is just tremendous, and he's one of the greatest heels of all time. And I just think that what Randy's been able to do in his 17-year career is tremendous, and still how he's able to come into the ring and still convince you with the 3 most destructive letters in sports entertainment. And not to mention one of my other favorite moves, the punt, which just literally took guys out of commission and looked absolutely devastating to take. Just everything about Randy Orton just screamed badass to me, screamed crazy, screamed lunatic. Like, to this day, I still think he's nuts, and I don't think he would doubt me. All right, let's move on to number 4. I have Shelton Benjamin. If I was ever going to do a list of the most underrated wrestlers of all time, Shelton and Ricky would be neck and neck, but I would give Shelton the slight edge. If you look at what Shelton Benjamin was able to do, especially in 2005, it was his year. He was Intercontinental Champion. He was facing any and everybody. He beat Triple H. He faced off against Shawn Michaels. He beat Ric Flair, Batista, Randy Orton. Was a tremendous year. And not to mention, he's also Mr. Money in the Bank because of all the highlight moments he has in that match. I think that what Shelton Benjamin has been able to do, it just does not get enough credit. Now, this isn't to say he was a great all-around performer, because his mic work could have used some skill. His character work could have used some refinement, especially when he was the gold standard, which was stupid. But his match quality is undisputed. He is one of the most athletic and talented in-ring performers the WWE has ever seen. Not to mention, he participated in my all-time favorite match, Shawn Michaels versus him, Gold Rush tournament. Check it out. It's on the WWE Network. Just go to Raw episode May 2nd. You're not in 2005. You're not going to want to miss it, I swear. And if you haven't seen the match, but you think you know what I'm talking about, just remember it's the Sweet Chin music heard around the world. But overall, just looking at Shelton Benjamin's body of work, it is great. Of course, he might not be a guy that a lot of people get excited about, but if you just watch some of his matches, especially in his prime, and you see what he did in other companies, you see that he is truly talented. And I just wish the WWE would give him opportunities to showcase that talent. Number 3, it is the queen, your queen, my queen, Charlotte. When I got back into watching wrestling about 3-4 years ago, actually it was 3 years, I remember turning on Raw. It was like a little bit after WrestleMania, and one of the first things I saw, at least I distinctly remember, was this blonde woman, these 2 blonde women coming out, and Ric Flair coming out. And it was just like, who is this? And it said Charlotte Flair. I was like, Charlotte? Oh, okay. Ric Flair's daughter's wrestling. Cool. And that day just so happened to be when she cut the promo on Rick about how she stopped being Ric Flair's daughter and it started being Ric Flair was her dad. And as somebody growing up in a similar situation, just everything she said just made me just clicked. And I was like, you know what? I love her. I don't know who she is. I don't know what she's about, but I love her. And then it just grew from there, just not just because of her ring work, especially in 2016, which I feel was her best, but just everything she's done over her career. I mean, she is a 9-time women's champion. That is unheard of. It's literally unheard of. I'm sorry, I lied. She's a 10-time champion. 10-time champion. That is unheard of. Not only for her to be 10, but just be a double-digit champion. That's hard enough. But for her to get those accolades in just 5 years, it's crazy. And it's no telling how much more she'll actually be able to achieve. Now, if you listen to the show, I always say that I think that she's going to get as many, if not more, reigns than Ric Flair. And I could see it happening within the next couple of years. But I mean, if you watch her body of work, she deserves it. Her heel work is second to none of the women's division. Even some men can't touch her. Her in-ring ability, just the ground-breaking matches she's participated in, such as the Hell in a Cell match with Sasha Banks. She was in the first Money in the Bank match. She's the first women's Grand Slam champion. Yes, Bayley, you're second. No disrespect, because you're great and all, but Charlotte did it first. Not to mention just the stellar matches he's had. Like, if you look at NXT TakeOver, her match for the NXT Women's Championship against Natalya, one of the greatest women's matches in NXT history. If you look at her matches with Sasha during 2016, I can't even just pinpoint one of them because they were all great. And my own personal favorite, the triple threat match at WrestleMania 32 between her, Sasha, and Becky. Just everything that she does in the ring, you can tell is perfection. And what makes it even better is she has all this pressure to be the woman. Her dad is Ric Flair. You can't just be a scrub in the ring or on the mic and your dad is Ric Flair. And she not only is not a scrub, if you ask me, she is the greatest woman wrestler of all time. And I literally argue this point all the time. It's on the first episode of the debate series. Cheap plug. But no, I think that she's the greatest, not even just being biased. I just think that her body of work, everything she represents is what you want out of a woman superstar. All right, number 2, I have the game, the cerebral assassin, Triple H. I mean, there's not much more I need to say about Triple H. His career resume speaks for itself. I mean, what more could you want out of a WWE superstar? He had the look, he had the attitude, he had the mic skills, he had the in-ring prowess, he had the toughness, everything you could want out of a wrestler. Triple H embodied it. Just everything that he was able to do, either as a heel or a face, is great. Now, kind of in the same breath as a JBL about not being the most likable guy, just look at what he did in his career. Look at the careers that he has made as a heel specifically. Randy Orton, CM Punk, Daniel Bryan. You look at those guys who have become instant fan favorites or who have become legends in their own right, and it's mainly because of what Triple H was able to do. Triple H makes careers. Triple H wins titles. He wins the big ones. He's one of those guys who, when you need a good match, when you need somebody to literally bleed for the company, Triple H will do it. Not only that, but in his office role as the COO, he's done a tremendous job of putting the company in a position to succeed. Not to mention, he's in charge of NXT, and NXT is the best brand in the company, actually in all of sports entertainment. So Triple H had to make this list, and number 1, you would know who it is unless you were somehow living under a rock. It's the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. If you listen to any of my top 10 favorite wrestling matches or move sets, any of that, you're bound to hear Shawn Michaels' name come up about 3, 4, maybe 5, 6 times. I love Shawn Michaels. He, in my opinion, is the greatest wrestler of all time. He's Mr. WrestleMania. He's the first 2-time Royal Rumble winner. He's the first superstar to win the Royal Rumble from the number one position. The accolades just keep going and going and going. This man can literally have a great match with a candle, a broom. He even had a tremendous match with Vince McMahon. How difficult is that? Somebody tell me how you can pull a great match out of Vince McMahon, even though it was a little bit gimmicky, just the storytelling, honestly, of all his matches, not to mention his feud with Triple H, which is the best feud ever. I mean, come on. It can't be anybody but Shawn